everybody. Welcome back to Worst Case Macchiato. This is episode 3. Today I'm gonna talk about the case of the Golden State Killer. But before we kind of get into it, do you have any updates on your life or any of the cases that we covered last 2 weeks, Madison?
No, I have. There's still no updates on anything, so I think we're good to just get right into it.
Perfect. Okay, so just to start, he was known as multiple different names throughout his criminal career, mostly
Interesting.
because he kept moving around and changing the level of crimes that he was doing. He progressively got more and more violent as he went through his life. So before he was known as the Golden State Killer, he was known as 2 different criminals in 2 different areas, and these are the main 2 names that he was known as. So the first criminal name he was originally known as was the Visalia Ransacker. Visalia is in California, and starting in April of 1974, there were over 100 home burglaries, and this continued until December of 1975. So these home burglaries that he committed went on for roughly a year and a half. Typically, he would go into people's houses, go through their belongings, vandalize their house and belongings, and then also go through the women's underwear drawers and scatter their underwear around the room.
Which is crazy to me that that's something that we see that's like super common with a lot of killers and rapists is the taking of the undergarments, which I think is just like so odd to me. But I don't know, it's almost like a trophy to them. Like it just kind of baffles me that that's like a prized possession to them because we'll explore it further in other cases, but it's weird to me.
Well, when serial killers or just criminals in general take trophies, it allows killers to feel powerful and relive their crimes as a fantasy. So it's very common for criminals who are sex criminals to want to take something that reminds them of these sex crimes that they committed. But he didn't always take things of high value. He was known for taking things of low value, such as low price pair of earrings, as well as sometimes he only took one of a pair of earrings, which is just so odd. Like, why take one?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting that it's just like one and not like the pair. But I guess like it makes them know for sure somebody was there. Like I don't know. It's a little odd for sure.
So, this was evident to the police that he was ransacking these homes for a thrill and to scare the people that he was around and scare the people that he was burglarizing, just so they would know that it could happen at any time. Someone can just get into their house. It was believed that he took things that were extremely different and not as common, and they believe that these were probably because he was keeping them as mementos because they were never sold anywhere, as far as they know. The last known activity of the ransacker was 2 months later, on December 12th, 1975, when he was caught prowling by a local detective. He was stalking the people that he was going to burglarize, and when a detective confronted him, he pretended to surrender. He pulled out a gun, shot at the detective. He didn't hit the detective at all, so no injuries came to the detective, but it did shatter the policeman's flashlight, and then he
That's
escaped.
crazy.
The police believed that he had burglarized over 150 homes in his time in Visalia.
Which again, you said 150 in a year?
In a year and a half.
In a year and a half. So that's like almost one every couple days. Like that's pretty impressive that he was able to commit that many and like not be detected or like not be caught. Like to get away with that many is kind of insane.
Yeah, I think it comes out to roughly one every 2 or 3 days. I think it's one every two and a half. but it is a lot. And to know when these people aren't going to be home as well every 2 days means that he must have been watching them for a long time. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's mind-boggling that someone could get away with, like, you wouldn't get away with that today's day and age with like all the footage and cameras that people have on their homes, but it's crazy that back then you could, do something to that magnitude and not get caught.
He had a cooling off period, about uh, a 6 months cooling down period, because then on June 18th, 1976, a series of rapes started happening in the Sacramento area in California. And this is now the era of his criminal career where he is known as the East Area Rapist. He would find a specific woman, watch them from afar, learn their routines, where they lived, then he would break into their homes and rape them. Multiple women reported waking up to seeing a man standing at the end of their bed, sometimes naked, and usually holding a weapon.
That is crazy. That is so creepy and disturbing.
Yeah, and honestly, it reminds me of sleep paralysis demons, which I'm going to talk about later on in the podcast in another episode. But people will wake up in sleep paralysis, not being able to move, and they will see a demon just like standing over them and stuff. And it's wild and creepy. He usually targeted women who were home alone or lived alone, but sometimes he would target couples. And even when they weren't couples, sometimes the male was home at the time. So when a male was home, he would break in as normal, scare them both, and then he would have the women tie up their husbands.
That is like so definitely serial killer vibes. Like that is so sketchy.
And he was very meticulous. He always made sure that the women were tying their husbands correctly. And then they had the men lie down, and he would instruct the women to put a stack of plates on top of them, usually on their chest. And he would tell them that if he hears the plates move, or that if he heard anything suspicious, that he would kill them, the wife, or both. Then he would take the wife to the room next door where the husbands can hear him rape and beat their wives.
They had to just like he made them suffer. Like there was nothing that they could do. He straight up made them suffer.
He was also known for lingering in people's houses. So he would, after raping them or killing them, when it progressed to that, he would stay in the house for a couple hours, make himself comfortable. Sometimes he would make himself food, and it was also known that he would sit on their back decks and drink a coffee, and then he would obviously go through their stuff, kind of just going back to when he was the Visalia Ransacker there.
Yeah, like it's weird that you would hang out like again, you kind of think that it's one of those things that you're gonna commit them, get out of there and get as far away from as possible, but a lot of them think that they can just kind of obviously do whatever they want and nobody's going to suspect them, but they also just kind of think that I don't know, they get like satisfaction from staying for whatever reason.
Well, it makes them feel invincible, right? They feel like they'll never get caught, that doesn't matter what they do, how much evidence they leave behind, they will never be caught by the police. And it's just that the belief of invincibility just keeps them lingering, and the longer they're there, the more satisfied they are and the more smarter they feel. Weird. Almost all the victims mentioned that a man would shine a bright light in their eyes as they were waking up to stun them, repeatedly telling them not to look at his face, and he would be wearing a ski mask. So that was his typical MO. Although the ski mask hid a lot of his characteristics, the police believed that he was around 6 feet tall, had blondish brown hair, was a white man, was slender, and in good shape. And something that I find absolutely hilarious is that all the victims reported that he had a small dick.
I mean, if you're doing something like that, you like clearly have some sort of issues and whatever, but
And in my notes, I wrote effing LMAO.
literally.
And something I say all the time is I think this is a severe case of SDS, where SDS stands for small dick syndrome. And honestly, this is probably overcompensation for, you know, he probably felt embarrassed. And so the way that he felt that he could be powerful and, show that it didn't matter, he needed to be violent with people. During stalking his victims, it was known that he actually broke into his victims' homes multiple times before attacking them, and without them even knowing that he was even there.
That's crazy.
Usually he would break into stash supplies and just plan everything down to a T. And sometimes he would sneak in when they weren't home and hide until they got home, and then he would attack them. So he would have already been in the house. So they would have just been completely blindsided. After attacking his victims, he would taunt the victims afterwards with creepy phone calls, which also signifies the thrill that he gets from victimizing people. The Sacramento area started hosting town hall meetings to answer questions and warn people about the rapist because they were getting more and more aggressive and violent as time went on. One night, the East Area Rapist called the police and told them that he was going to strike that night near Watt Avenue, near the office of a dentist who contributed an additional $10,000 as a reward for the apprehension of the rapist. The police then went to the area and looked for him, and then they saw a man in a ski mask walking over a bridge. They did chase after him, but he was, however, too quick for the police and got away. In 1978, he started to not only commit the rapes, but then he moved on to murder. A couple named Brian and Kate were walking their dog when a man in a ski mask holding a gun walked up behind them. He ended up chasing them into a neighbor's backyard. Usually, when he was intimidating couples, the man always did what he had told them to do out of fear that he would kill both of them and their wife. However, due to them being outside rather than trapped inside a room, Brian fought back. This was uncharted territory for the East Area Rapist. He freaked out, realized the only way out was to kill them, and then he shot both of them because he knew he couldn't fight back against two of them. This couple was known as his first murders. He was good at moving around to different areas to commit crimes. In 1979, he moved down into the southern areas of California, where he became known as the original Night Stalker. And this is not to get confused with the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez. It's a completely different story, so I just want to make that impendently clear. Golden State Killer's third and fourth killings happened on December 30th, 1979. He entered Robert Offerman and Deborah Manning's house. He went through their back sliding glass door. They were sleeping in their beds at the time. Then he tied them both up, raped the woman, and then killed them both. March 13th, 1980, the next murders happened. The victims were Charlene and Lyman Smith, and this was in the Ventura area. He did the same thing to the Smiths that he had done to the last couple. However, his use of a weapon had changed. He beat Charlene and Lyman to death with a log from their own fireplace. This was the only time that he ever changed his weapon in between killings.
Interesting. Yeah.
One of the first things that police noticed was that this killer was knowledgeable with knots. This led them to believe that he was possibly a scout or part of the military or maybe even police. Due to his extraneous detail in the knotting, he sometimes was called the Diamond Knot Killer because the knots that he would use would look like diamonds.
Which is not like a common knot to use.
August of 1980, he killed a younger couple named Keith and Patrice Harrington in Orange County. February 6, 1981, he killed his first lone victim, Manuela Hitton. July 27th, 1981, he killed Shari Domingo and Gregory Sanchez in their home. And then on May 4th, 1986, he killed Janelle Cruz, who is known as the last murder of the original Night Stalker or Golden State Killer as the case went cold. At this time in 1986, the connection was not made that the original Night Stalker, the East Area Rapist, the Visalia Ransacker were all the same person. And it was cold for the next 15 years. But then in 2001, once DNA technology started picking up and getting better, they found out that the East Area Rapist and the Night Stalker were indeed the same person. A very influential person came into the case. She was a journalist with no criminology background, no law enforcement background, but she was investigating the case on her own. Her name was Michelle McNamara. She was extremely obsessed with this case and ended up becoming a huge part of it. She actually gave him the name of the Golden State Killer. In 2013, she wrote an article in LA Magazine about the Golden State Killer, and the article did so well that she got a book deal for it. The book is now released, and it is called I'll Be Gone in the Dark, One Woman's Obsessive Search for the Golden State Killer. She was almost done writing the book when she suddenly passed away in her sleep on April 21st, 2016 at age 46.
So she didn't even finish it before she passed away.
No, unfortunately, she died before the book was even finished. And the autopsy did report that there was Adderall, Xanax, and fentanyl in her system. This is not to say that she was murdered. Nothing came about this. It was just noted in a lot of articles that I read about it. And the podcasts and YouTube videos that I've watched and listened to all talk about how invested people getting these cases, and it can drive people to substance abuse because you're so invested and so frustrated with the case. So I also just want to make that known and put that out there as well. When she passed away, her husband, Patton Oswalt, a comedian, wanted to finish the book for her, so he worked with Paul Haynes and Billy Jensen to complete it. In February of 2018, the book was officially released and was on the New York Times bestseller list for 15 consecutive weeks. This book didn't add anything to the case when looking at evidence, but it did spark public interest, therefore expanding the resources for public information and outreach to the public. June 15th, 2016, the FBI released a new composite sketch and a $50,000 reward. As we know, since the 1970s, DNA testing has gotten extremely good. It is a very common thing for people to partake in DNA testing through kits such as Ancestry and 23andMe DNA kits. While the public generally uses these DNA testing kits to look at their lineage, and they can also tell you if you're genetically predisposed to getting a certain disease such as Alzheimer's, and stuff like that. There is now a public DNA database called GED Match. In January 2018, detectives ended up uploading the Golden State Killer's DNA they still had from a rape kit decades ago in Ventura County. The website found 10 to 20 different people who were considered matches for possible descendants of the Golden State Killer.
Interesting that that's how they're able to make a connection. I didn't realize that's how he was eventually caught. To be honest, obviously heard of the case, but I didn't realize that it took that long, and for them to go through something like that, you can't do things like that in Canada to get somebody's DNA. But crazy that that's what ultimately brought a resolution to this case.
Comparing ages to the Golden State Killer, obituaries, gravesite locators, census records, and DNA databases to narrow down their search, the police landed on 2 suspects. However, one of these two suspects was ruled out because they did a DNA test of a close relative and figured out that it was not genetically connected. So this left one person, Joseph James D'Angelo. The police tracked down D'Angelo and watched him for days, waiting for him to throw something out that would have his DNA on it. And while I've seen this on, shows like Criminal Minds or CSI Miami, those shows are also based in the States. So, seeing as your police foundation student, do you know if that is able to be done here in Canada? Just because, like we have such more intense privacy laws in the States. So does the privacy laws come into effect when it comes to, situations like this where you're trying to gather DNA to see if somebody could be a suspect or not?
Yeah, so they actually do allow that in Canada because you have no reasonable expectation of privacy once something is discarded. So, if you were to put your household trash to the curb, the police could go by and take the whole bag and go through it looking for your DNA, because you no longer have an expectation of privacy since you've now discarded that piece. So, in Canada, they do the same thing. They just can watch and then go pick up a cigarette butt or whatever that you've thrown. So that is allowed.
Another question I have for you is in regards to the DNA testing of these kits and everything like that, because you said that Canada can't use that information that people willingly give up. And so if they're able to search through someone's trash because they discarded it, why can't the Canadian authorities use the DNA found in these DNA kits through Ancestry and 23andMe, seeing as they're discarding their spit to get the DNA results?
Yeah, I'm not sure like what uh the issue or the reasoning behind why Canadian police officers and stuff could not use that, because I feel like there's probably a lot of unsolved cases within Canada that could be resolved by, a quick familial DNA match with one of those systems. Um, but yeah, I'm not sure what exactly the privacy laws and stuff are, but I just know that as far as like picking up a cigarette butt or whatever, like you lose all expectations of privacy once you discard something.
So I just looked it up. So apparently the Canadian authorities can subpoena DNA evidence for a particular person if they have submitted something or their family member has submitted something into a DNA database such as Ancestry, 23andMe, and all them.
Okay, so that's interesting because I didn't even know that law enforcement were allowed to subpoena that to get that from them. I didn't realize that was even allowed. So that's interesting to kind of learn that the police can actually request that if they really need to.
But they have to have good enough evidence to believe that that person is the actual suspect. They can't just say, oh, we want to search everybody in the database. They have to say, okay, well, we're looking for Timmy, and Timmy has done this. He was in the right place at the right time. We just want to see if his DNA matches, and then they can subpoena it. But they can't just be like, okay, well, we need to find somebody, throw this into the system.
Yeah, they would have to obviously have reasonable probable cause to obviously to look at it, but they would have to have more that evidence alone wouldn't stand, like it wouldn't stand on its own. You'd have to have other um, information to be able to request that, and obviously you'd have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that you believe it's that person to be able to get that and to get that signed off on and approved to for them to have to provide that to you.
They ended up collecting DNA off of one of his car door handles, and they also collected a tissue that he had blown his nose into and threw out. On April 24th, 2018, they arrested Joseph D'Angelo, and he was charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder. On May 10th, the Barbara District Attorney's Office charged him with 4 more counts of murder. Unfortunately, there wasn't any DNA to tie him to the Visalia Ransacker burglaries, but D'Angelo did confess to the burglaries in his guilty pleas in June 2020. He also wasn't charged with any of the burglaries and rapes as the statute of limitations had expired years ago. But he did end up being charged with 13 counts of murder and 13 counts of kidnapping. Although he only got these 26 counts, it is estimated that he committed at least 50 rapes in California and over 100 burglaries. D'Angelo's arraignment was in Sacramento on August 23rd, 2018. And now that I have gone through all of his criminal history, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Golden State Killer's past that had came out in trial. So Joseph D'Angelo was born in New York, and his family moved to California when he was quite young. In 1964, he joined the U.S. Navy and served for 2 years in Vietnam.
Which explains the knots.
Yeah, exactly. According to a relative, while his father, who was a U.S. Army sergeant, was stationed in West Germany, Joseph was only 9 or 10 years old, but apparently he had witnessed his sister being gang raped by 2 airmen. During his trial, the siblings of Joseph did tell the court that their father abused him heavily as a child. So these 2 scenarios here, being abused and watching his sister being raped, if the rape did happen, it's just saying that a relative said this, it cannot be confirmed or denied. But if this did happen, usually there's 2 ways being witness to something and being a victim of abuse can actually go.
Yeah, and I mean, there's also that like family, kind of chain where you have a family member who does something, and then the next one will kind of like that generational trauma that kind of gets passed along, and it seems like he didn't break that cycle and just kept it going.
Victims of abuse, they usually always end up insecure. However, it changes the way that insecurity manifests in them. Usually they want to get revenge and feel powerful, which is what happened in Joseph's case here, where he wanted to control other people because he had no control growing up. And seeing such violence, it's no surprise, at least to me, that if he did witness his sister being raped at 9 or 10 years old, when he was 9 or 10 years old, it does not surprise me that the course of his criminal career did go in that path. But the other way that usually happens of victims of abuse is if they're not inflicting pain on other people, they become extremely isolated because they're afraid of other people's actions towards them. Both scenarios make them extremely antisocial most of the time, but they're not always violent. I just want to make that apparent. When he got older, Joseph D'Angelo went into the Navy and he served in Vietnam, as I stated earlier. Once he left the Navy, he graduated from Sierra College with an associate's degree in police science, and he actually graduated with honors. So he was an extremely intelligent student. In May 1970, Joseph became engaged to Bonnie Jean Caldwell, a classmate of his, but she did break it off when he started to become extremely abusive towards her. She noted in an interview that he once pulled out a gun to try to force her to marry him, and the breakup angered him so much that to some of his rape victims, he did tell them, and I quote, "I hate you, Bonnie."
Damn, like to hold a grudge, against one person and for that long, and to abuse so many other people because of, her saying no, and that should have been a telltale sign right there. Like, that's crazy.
He was extremely affected by being abandoned by his fiancée, and he held that hate for a while. In 1971, he attended Sacramento State University and earned his bachelor's degree in criminal justice. From May 1973 to August 1976, he was a burglary unit police officer in Exeter.
The irony of him being a burglary police officer committing all those burglaries. Like, he would literally have the knowledge to know what to avoid and what not, like what to do and what not to do.
But while he was in this burglary unit, he was considered a black sheep amongst his colleagues. Eventually, in this burglary unit, he was promoted to sergeant in charge of the Exeter's PD's Joint Attack on Burglary program.
What? No wonder why he was never caught. Like, he literally was like, oh, it's not me. Like, there's no, like, he was able to cover up all his crimes because he was in charge of everything. Like, that is mind blowing. But again, like, police officers are someone, the community is supposed to be able to trust. So, like, they typically tend to be one of the last ones that people will look at as far as committing such a heinous crime or, crimes to that extent and to that level. Like, that's just nuts to me.
Yeah, like it's no surprise to me that he didn't get caught, because if you're the one investigating your own thing, of course you're gonna miss evidence or you're gonna hide evidence if any was found. And he probably tampered with some evidence as well. I would not be surprised. In 1979, his law enforcement career came to an end. Do you want to take a guess at what you think ended his career?
I honestly don't have the slightest clue because he's gotten away with so much already. I don't know. It's probably gonna be something super small and petty that, like, I I don't even know.
His law enforcement career came to an end because he got caught stealing a hammer and some dog repellent from his police station.
Oh my God. Like, to throw away his whole career for something so little, but like to think if he hadn't been, I mean, it still took so long for him to obviously be arrested and charged on, all his crimes, and some he wasn't charged with because of the statute of limitations. But if he hadn't, done that, like, he might have gotten away with even more or committed even more and just hid behind his badge. Like, that's crazy.
In 1980, he married a woman named Sharon Murray Huddle, and they purchased a house together in Citrus Heights, California, where he was eventually arrested. 10 years after they got married, they separated in 1991, but he still resided in the house that they bought together while Sharon moved out. This was after they had a few kids together. The house that he was arrested in was the house he bought with Sharon, and he was living there with one of his daughters and his grandchild. I also read in an article about his arrest that when he was arrested, he didn't say, "Oh, what did I do?" or "It wasn't me." All he said was, "Oh, there's a roast in the oven. There's a roast in the oven."
Other than his only concern of food than he was the fact that his life was now over, especially like at his age, because he's what, like 75 when he gets arrested, or like early 70s when he was arrested. No, he's 77, I think now, isn't he not?
Yeah, he's 77 now, which means that he was arrested when he was 72, roughly. He worked for most of his life after being a police officer as a truck mechanic until he retired in 2017, only to be arrested a year after retirement. His ex-brother-in-law also stated in an interview that he often would bring up the East Area Rapist over the years, saying that he was trying to figure out who it was. So he obviously wanted to see that others were keeping track of the East Area Rapist and talking about him inadvertently. It just showed the extreme attention seeking he was trying to gain from other people. At the time he was arrested, like I said, he was living with his daughter and granddaughter. And his neighbors also noted that he was very known for being the grumpy old man next door. The neighbors noted having witnessed him having loud outbursts outside, seemingly yelling at nothing but thin air. One neighbor also received a call from Joseph who said that he would, and I quote, deliver a load of death upon them
What?
because their dogs were barking
What?
outside.
All right. Sounds like a great guy.
In April of 2018, HBO purchased the rights to McNamara's book and will be making a docu-series out of it eventually. I believe that there's already a movie out about the Golden State Killer, but I don't believe the entire docu-series has been released. When D'Angelo pleaded guilty to 13 counts of first-degree murder and 13 counts of kidnapping, this was actually part of a plea bargain to avoid the death penalty. On August 21st, 2020, D'Angelo received multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole, which means that he will be in prison for the rest of his life.
I mean, he's 77, so like he will spend the rest of his natural life in prison. Like,
After being sentenced, D'Angelo did offer a brief apology after listening to all of the victim impact statements, and he said, and I've quote, I've listened to all of your statements, each one of them, and I'm truly sorry to everyone I've hurt. And the district attorneys, as well as reporters, family members of the victims, etc., they all believe that this is just bullshit. This is fluff, just kind of rubbing in their faces that, you know, he didn't get caught for so long and their family members are gone.
you're really not sorry. He's just so smug, like he has zero sympathy for what he did. He still just seems to have that air of cockiness and arrogance about him.
In November 2020, D'Angelo was transferred to the North Kern State Prison, which is a medium security prison. And then in February of 2021, he was incarcerated into protective custody at California State Prison in Corcoran, California.
Sorry, where is he being held?
He was originally put into a medium security prison called North Kern State Prison, and then he was moved to a min-max security prison called California State Prison in Corcoran.
Okay, so yeah, that's like a super high max. It's just like so crazy to me that again, like obviously he had to have had like a military background or police background to get away with it as long as he did. Like he got away with that for we're talking like what, 50 years for being caught? Like and not even like if, things like Ancestry DNA or like 23andMe and, those kind of databases didn't exist, like it's possible that he would still be a free man today, like that's
Yeah, it's almost makes you think that with the Zodiac Killer, it might be the same scenario where he knew what to leave, what not to leave, and everything like that. Obviously, um, we'll cover the Zodiac Killer in another episode as well, but for the people to get away with it for so long, they have to have some sort of knowledge of police field work where they know what they look for, what they don't look for, so that they can avoid it. There are also multiple cameos of serial killers like the Golden State Killer in Criminal Minds, which is my favorite TV show on the planet. So, probably the most cut and paste criminals on Criminal Minds that are almost exactly like the Golden State Killer. The first one's Floyd Hansen. Both were serial killers and rapists who committed crimes against women. They evolved from fetish burglaries and then they targeted lone women and they tied them up, forced the men to watch while they raped the women, and then bludgeoned them to death. So that also kind of plays into the specific case of the second killing that he did of the second couple, where he beat them to death. He bludgeoned them to death with a log from their own fireplace. There is also the piano killer in Criminal Minds, where the piano guy would call his victims afterwards and taunt them after raping them, because D'Angelo also did that. But probably the most cut and dry when it comes to the the burglaries is the case of Billy Flynn, which covered the season's finale of season 5 and the series opener of season 6. Um, Billy Flynn would break into the house of couples and families where California would shut down neighborhoods block by block certain nights because to reserve power, and so it would make everyone vulnerable because it was so dark. So then he would break into their houses, steal from them. He would stand above the women, and then as they woke up, he would rape them. He killed them. He also killed some cops. None of these criminals in Criminal Minds were ever cops that did it. It was more just the crimes and the the villainy of the actions that he did that was portrayed in people in Criminal Minds.
I feel like it kind of like rings a bell a little bit, but again, like we're talking, it's been years. Like I don't think I've seen Criminal Minds since like probably season 5, and even then, like um, I'm not even sure when that was released. It would have been like shortly after it was released. So 2000, 2009, season 5 was released. So we're we're talking many moons ago since I've seen that show. So
That's fair. I continuously rewatch it on a loop. I watch it and rewatch it all the time. But that was the story of the Golden State Killer, aka the Visalia Ransacker, aka the original Night Stalker, aka the East Area Rapist. And it was a doozy. It was a crazy case. I'm still a little cheesed that he got to live so much of his life outside of prison, completely free, while he took the life of people and made people fear for their lives for so long. And the families of the victims couldn't get closure. It's just, I know he's put away now, but it still irks me.
yeah, it's just unfortunate that he was able to enjoy his entire life. Well, he took so many victims who, didn't get to have their lives.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the end of the case for me. Do you have anything else that you would like to add?
No, I think we're good for this one.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you for listening to Worst Case Macchiato, episode 3. If you would like to ever get in contact with us, we are available on our Instagram at Worst Case Macchiato, or you can also email us at worstcasemacchiato@gmail.com. You can just update us on cases. If we made any mistakes about anything that you would like us to talk about in the next one to kind of just set the record straight, just let us know. Or you can also suggest a case to us on either one of our platforms, either on Instagram or through our email. And we hope you have an amazing day. And like always, we'll see you in the next one.